Awakening from the dark chaos, the young man, Ren Xiaosu, wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the 13 or 14-year-old boy at the door. Lu Yuan, is there something wrong? Ren Xiaosu asked. The boy referred to as Lu Yuan was actually named Yen Lu Yuan. Yen Lu Yuan looked harmless to both humans and animals, appearing very innocent, yet he held a bone knife in his hand, guarding the door. It was late at night, and he looked very tired but never closed his eyes because he was on night watch. Yen Lu Yuan shook his head and said, "No, what's wrong with your head? Can't the doctors in the town figure out what's wrong? You don't need to worry about this. It's not a disease," Ren Xiaosu said decisively. "It's almost dawn. I'm going to hunt. You sleep a bit and go to school on time." "Okay," Yen Lu Yuan nodded dully. "What's the use of studying well in this wasteland? I said it's useful, then it's useful," Ren Xiaosu said in an unquestionable tone. "I also want to go hunting," Yen Lu Yuan pouted. "Who will keep watch at night if something happens to you? Me in a coma?" Ren Xiaosu stood up to fetch water from the town center. "It's not so dangerous in town at dawn. The night here is a lawless land." The gloomy sky was filled with rolling clouds, and a drop of acid rain finally fell from the cloud layer. It swayed in the strong wind and finally fell in front of Ren Xiaosu with a plop. Ren Xiaosu, lying on the wasteland, frowned and thought that his luck wasn't good today. The game hadn't arrived yet, but the acid rain had. Some people say that one must be careful of wild beasts when walking on this wasteland, but Ren Xiaosu thought that this person didn't tell the whole truth because there were many other things on this wasteland that could kill people, one of which was acid rain. However, Ren Xiaosu still didn't move. If there was no game today, he and Yen Lu Yuan would starve to death before the acid rain brought disease. Suddenly, there was a sound of bird wings flapping the air. Ren Xiaosu's eyes widened suddenly, but his breath remained steady. Not far in front of Ren Xiaosu, he propped up a black iron pot with a tree branch, and under the iron pot, he sprinkled a little bit of black bread crumbs. The big bird landed next to the iron pot and looked around warily, with sharp eyes. The size of this bird was not much smaller than the iron pot. It stood in place grooming its feathers for a long time, while Ren Xiaosu continued to wait without moving. It seemed that the big bird finally let down its guard and slowly moved towards the iron pot, its steps as delicate as a thief's, but as soon as it entered the range of the iron pot and was about to peck at the bread crumbs, Ren Xiaosu suddenly pulled hard on the rope in his hand. Then the young man jumped up and rushed towards the iron pot like a runaway wild donkey. He pressed the iron pot firmly with his body before the big bird could overturn it. Huff! Ren Xiaosu let out a sigh of relief. He had been waiting for this sparrow for a whole night, but thankfully, his efforts today were not in vain. Such good opportunities are not available every day. The sound of the sparrow struggling under the iron pot, the hard wings rubbing against the iron pot to make a sharp sound, the sound of the clock in the shelter barrier came melodiously at this time. Ren Xiaosu looked back and wondered when he would be able to bring Yen Lu Yuan into the shelter barrier. For Ren Xiaosu, the people inside the shelter barrier were happy because they didn't have to face the dangers of the wasteland, but it's not a place where anyone can enter if they want to. At this time, the movement in the iron pot finally became much smaller. He sighed and confirmed that the rag on his hand had been wrapped properly, and then slowly lifted the iron pot to reveal a small gap. Ren Xiaosu's hand reached into the gap, trying to grab the leg of this big sparrow, but life will not always be smooth sailing. As soon as Ren Xiaosu's hand reached in, he cried out in pain. Ren Xiaosu pulled back his hand and saw that his tiger's mouth was bleeding. The rag didn't block the sharp beak of the big sparrow. Ren Xiaosu was angry. He simply took off his ragged coat and wrapped it around his hand. His palm suddenly stretched into the iron pot. This time he caught the neck of the sparrow in one go. He simply pulled the sparrow out and tucked it under his arm, twisted it hard, and the sparrow's neck made a click and never moved again. At this time, Ren Xiaosu suddenly felt heartache because his coat was poked with several holes by the big sparrow's claws. Suddenly, there was a bang in his mind, and Ren Xiaosu knelt on the ground. It was as if a huge bronze bell was ringing in his head, and he fell into the dark chaos. Damn, the usual illness only came at midnight. This time it came early. This wasn't his first seizure. Almost everyone in the town knew that his brain was a bit problematic, and he would have pain attacks from time to time, but Ren Xiaosu knew very well that it was not pain, but pure chaos. Wait, this time is different from the past. The black fog in his mind actually opened, revealing a palace inside. Ren Xiaosu suddenly opened his eyes, looked at himself incredulously, and said, "I woke up so quickly this time." He originally had the opportunity to take a good look at the appearance of the palace, but he knew more clearly that falling into a coma in such a wilderness was tantamount to suicide. He must now rush back to the town outside the 113 shelter barrier before the acid rain arrives completely. Ren Xiaosu tied the two claws of the sparrow and hung them on his shoulder, then picked up his big iron pot and turned it upside down on his head and started running wildly. The raindrops hit the iron pot and made a da-da-da sound. This time, the iron pot became his umbrella. However, before he ran far, there was a figure standing in front of him holding a bone knife. "Give me the game." But before the man could finish his sentence, he saw a huge iron pot coming closer and closer in his field of vision, and it hit him hard in the face. Grass! The robber fell backward. He didn't expect Ren Xiaosu to act so decisively. And so strong. Ren Xiaosu saw that the robber hadn't even fallen to the ground, and he was already running away. The robber lay on his back, with the acid rain hitting his face causing a slight sting. He was a bit confused. Aren't people usually supposed to have some communication? How many such situations has this young man encountered to have such an instinctive reaction? No, the sound of that young man's footsteps is getting closer again. The robber hurriedly sat up and turned his head to look. He actually saw that the young man had turned back. Ren Xiaosu was not planning to come back originally, but he clearly heard a voice in the palace in his mind. Task, give the game to others. Who's talking? Ren Xiaosu walked back towards the robber with doubt. The robber was panicked. We can talk about it. No, I'm the victim. Ren Xiaosu looked at the robber closely. There was no one else nearby. Do you want this sparrow? Ren Xiaosu asked. The robber's eyes lit up. Yes. Here you go. Ren Xiaosu stuffed the sparrow into the other's arms without saying a word. The strange and neutral voice sounded again. Task completed. Reward basic skill learning map. Can learn other people's abilities. Ren Xiaosu was stunned because he clearly felt that there was an extra piece of parchment in his mind. Skill learning map. Does that mean he can use this to directly copy other people's abilities? Hunting? Survival? Or something else? The robber held the huge sparrow tightly in his arms and was about to say some words of thanks. You're a good person. Before he could finish his sentence, he saw Ren Xiaosu pull the sparrow back and leave the robber. He watched Ren Xiaosu run away. What kind of people are these? What are they up to? Due to the incident with the robber and the sudden fainting, Ren Xiaosu returned late. He glanced at the sky that was about to be enveloped by darkness, and knew that it would be extremely dangerous to pass through the market with his prey at this time. During the day, people from the refuge barrier would come out to maintain order, but at night, they would retreat back into the barrier. Of course, the people in the refuge barrier were not kind-hearted. They were just worried that too much chaos in the market would affect the labor of the refugees. Hey, Ren Xiaosu, you made quite a catch today. When Ren Xiaosu entered the market carrying his iron pot, someone greeted him. The man's face was black as if he had never washed it since birth. Many people in the market were like this. In order to exchange for food, they would dig coal in the nearby mines during the day. This coal was transported into the refuge barrier, and the workers could get just enough black bread or potatoes to survive. Not only coal mining, all the dirty and tiring work needed by the barrier was done by the people outside. The well water in the market was rationed, and no one could draw more than their share. There were no clean water sources nearby, or the clean sources were too dangerous, attracting thirsty wild animals. So everyone in the market was dirty and their faces were indistinguishable. Ren Xiaosu was no exception. However, Ren Xiaosu never went to dig coal. He had his own way of survival. Ren Xiaosu did not respond to the greeting. He just wanted to quickly return to his own shack. As Ren Xiaosu passed through the small road in the market, the towering refuge barrier was not far away. Looking up, it seemed as if the end of the sky was full of oppression. There were not many buildings made of earth and stone in the market, and most of them were shacks for living. Ren Xiaosu, who was originally quite relaxed, suddenly became alert after entering the market. He even drew a bone knife from his waist. The atmosphere on the street became tense, as if there was something dangerous hidden in those shacks. But when Ren Xiaosu drew his bone knife, those who were about to move settled down again. The first thing Ren Xiaosu learned living here was not to trust anyone, except Yan Luyuan. Whispers came from the shacks on the side of the road. Ren Xiaosu actually caught a prey again. What kind of prey is that? It's just a sparrow. This is not the same as the sparrows in the old textbooks. I guess the eagle before the disaster was only this big. Don't provoke him, a voice ended the whispers, as if someone knew about Ren Xiaosu's past. Ren Xiaosu lifted the curtain of his home, and the warmth inside made his body seem less stiff. Yan Luyuan, who was sitting in the shack doing his homework, looked up and saw that Ren Xiaosu had returned, and was pleasantly surprised. Did you catch a sparrow? Why didn't you light the kerosene lamp? Ren Xiaosu asked with a frown. Yan Luyuan was not usually obedient, at least not in front of people other than Ren Xiaosu. But when facing his brother, Ren Xiaosu, he would always be surprisingly gentle. I want to save some kerosene for the house. What if you become short-sighted? Ren Xiaosu put down the sparrow. Yan Luyuan's eyes lit up and said, the teacher at the school said that before the disaster, there were glasses. He also said that there are actually glasses now, but they are only in the refuge barrier. With them, it doesn't matter if you are short-sighted. Ren Xiaosu disdained this kind of argument. I have seen someone wearing what you said, but in this wilderness, entrusting your vision to a thing that may fall off at any time is tantamount to suicide. Don't listen to your teacher's nonsense. Not everything your teacher says is right. Oh. Yan Luyuan nodded. Then why did you send me to school? Ren Xiaosu was choked. Why are you talking so much? When can I go hunting with you? Yan Luyuan asked again. You are only 14 years old, why do you need to learn hunting? If you study well in school, you don't have to go hunting, Ren Xiaosu said. Learn how to do accounts, learn physics and chemistry, isn't that better than hunting? You are only 17 years old. Yan Luyuan was unconvinced that in this era, even the most barbaric people knew the importance of knowledge. This was also the reason why the teacher could survive in the market. No matter what trouble happened in the market, the teacher was always the safest one. No one would target the teacher, however, tuition was expensive. Otherwise, Ren Xiaosu would also like to go and listen. Ren Xiaosu set up the iron pot and skillfully dissected the sparrow. What did the teacher talk about today? This sparrow can only give you some internal organs to eat, the rest has to be sold tomorrow. You're hurt. Yan Luyuan saw the wound on Ren Xiaosu's palm and frowned. It was pecked out by the sparrow, and the blood was flowing. The big iron pot was set on a stick, and the fire in the shack illuminated Ren Xiaosu's cheeks, a minor injury. The room fell silent. After a while, Ren Xiaosu scooped out the sparrow's internal organs from the pot and handed them to Yan Luyuan. Eat. Yan Luyuan suddenly had red eyes. I won't eat, you need to heal. I just need to drink some soup, Ren Xiaosu said. I still have black bread here. I won't eat. You are not just slightly injured. I saw someone in the market a few days ago who died from an infection caused by a small wound. We don't have medicine here, Yan Luyuan said stubbornly, tears almost falling. Slap. Ren Xiaosu suddenly slapped Yan Luyuan's face and said, remember, in this world, we can't shed tears. This world does not believe in tears. Ren Xiaosu continued, look at the people around us. If you don't eat, and someone breaks in and stabs me to death in the middle of the night, what will you do? I send you to school because I don't want you to go hunting like me. You have special abilities. As long as you study hard, you don't have to make a living in the wilderness like me. I send you to school because I don't want you to become barbaric like them. Yan Luyuan suddenly took the sparrow's internal organs handed over by Ren Xiaosu and wolfed them down. The tears did not fall in the end. He had to learn to be as strong as Ren Xiaosu. Cough cough, after you finish eating, bring a clean cloth to bandage my wound, Ren Xiaosu said. Okay, Yan Luyuan agreed. You are usually quite lively outside, but why do you become like a little bullied boy when you come home? Ren Xiaosu sighed. Did anything happen in the market today? Yes, Yan Luyuan said while looking for a clean cloth. A team came out of the refuge barrier, saying they were looking for a guide to take them to refuge barrier number 112. They want to go directly through the border mountain. To refuge barrier number 112? Ren Xiaosu was taken aback and frowned, and they have to go through the border mountain? Do you think they will find you? Everyone in the market knows that you are familiar with the outside. Yan Luyuan blinked and said, I heard that they are the band and singers from refuge barrier number 113, invited to perform in refuge barrier number 112. I have never seen a singer before. I won't go, Ren Xiaosu shook his head. Whoever wants to go to the border mountain area can go. You hide from them a bit. These people are strange. At this time, Ren Xiaosu felt a bit complicated. What kind of world is this? There are still people who sing specifically, and there are bands. What does it look like inside the refuge barrier? Ren Xiaosu suddenly yearned for it. Ren Xiaosu had gone to sleep. After standing guard in the wilderness for so long, he had finally managed to catch a sparrow. Although he spent most of the time lying motionless on the ground, anyone who knew the ropes would understand that lying still while remaining alert was the most draining. Before he went to sleep, he had instructed Yan Luyuan, stay away from those people. They must be aware of the dangers of the border mountains. Most people would choose to avoid the mountains, but they insist on passing through. My intuition tells me that there's more to this than meets the eye. Okay, Yan Luyuan obediently nodded. Got it. The pairing of Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan was indeed strange. A few years ago, they didn't even know each other. Later, Ren Xiaosu decided to protect the then young Yan Luyuan, partly because he accidentally discovered Yan Luyuan's secret, and partly because he needed someone to keep watch during the night due to his chronic headaches. At the beginning, Ren Xiaosu made it clear to Yan Luyuan that they were using each other. However, after these years, it was hard to tell whether it was out of affection or necessity. Yan Luyuan was always clever outside, but he acted like an obedient child only around Ren Xiaosu. Sometimes Yan Luyuan would say that his life was saved by Ren Xiaosu at the cost of his own, but Ren Xiaosu never acknowledged this. Now, Ren Xiaosu was about to explore what had happened in his brain. He had deliberately waited for a long time tonight, hoping to see if the illness that had troubled him would appear again. But the chaotic fog did not reappear. It was as if the palace had always been hidden in the chaotic fog of his mind, and the black fog had finally dissipated. Ren Xiaosu wanted to see what was inside this palace. Yan Luyuan glanced at Ren Xiaosu lying next to him, quietly picked up the bone knife, and sat at the entrance of the hut. The hut only had a thick curtain hanging in the doorway. Now that it was autumn, it was a bit cold. Just then, the rain stopped. Footsteps could be heard from outside the hut. The sound of boots stepping on the muddy road after the rain had a unique slippery feeling. The curtain was lifted slightly. But before the person outside could lift the curtain completely, Yan Liuyuan's bone knife was already against the person's throat. It was a beautiful face. A beautiful woman was standing outside. Yan Luyuan frowned. The visitor was not a stranger, she usually lived not far away. The woman smiled. Luyuan, you're still awake. Where's Xiaosu? I heard he's back. Xiaoyu, he's already asleep. Yan Luyuan smiled. If you have something to say, you can tell me. Xiaoyu looked a bit unnatural. He didn't get hurt this time, did he? He got a small peck from a sparrow. But Xiaoyu, you don't have to worry about my brother so much. After all, you're 8 years older than him. Yan Luyuan, who had matured beyond his years when dealing with outsiders after Ren Xiaosu fell asleep, said. Regardless of whether the person he was dealing with was a stranger or what they said, the bone knife in his hand never left Xiaoyu's neck. Xiaoyu took out a cigarette and a lighter from her bag. The cigarette was a roll-up, a kind only distributed in industries belonging to refuge barriers like coal mines and power plants. Many strong laborers worked not only for money and food but also for this cigarette. A day's work was rewarded with a cigarette. So, in the evening after work, you could often see a large group of people puffing away. Ren Xiaosu once told Yan Luyuan that these cigarettes might contain more addictive substances. Now, the cigarette that Xiaoyu was smoking was clearly not from her work. Xiaoyu lit the cigarette and took a couple of puffs, seemingly contemplating something. You're a smart kid, I consider you guys as my little brothers. Oh, Yan Luyuan suddenly asked, do you have a cold? Xiaoyu was taken aback. Yeah, can you tell from my hoarse voice? No, Yan Luyuan shook his head and smiled. I noticed when you were smoking that only one nostril was exhaling smoke. Xiaoyu, for some reason, Xiaoyu always felt that Yan Luyuan didn't like her very much. Well, I'll go back first, Xiaoyu said. Tell your brother when he wakes up that I came by. Sure, Yan Luyuan smiled, I'll tell him. After Xiaoyu left, Ren Xiaosu's voice suddenly sounded behind Yan Luyuan. In the future, don't always tease Xiaoyu. She has a hard life too. Brother, she's not clean, Yan Luyuan said, and she's only close to you because you always bring back game. Who is clean? Ren Xiaosu calmly said, in this world, those who want to survive can't stay clean. It's all forced by life. Just keep your distance and don't tease her. In this town, a single woman who was too clean couldn't survive. Ren Xiaosu thought for a moment and said, she never said she liked me. And, are you sure she's close to me because I can hunt? Could it be because of my handsome looks? Brother, everyone's face is almost the same because we haven't washed for months. Yan Luyuan looked at Ren Xiaosu speechlessly. Brother, weren't you sleeping? Why are you still awake? I'm thinking about something, Ren Xiaosu simply explained. Ren Xiaosu wasn't sleeping because he was exploring the secrets of the palace. Inside the circular palace, the walls were filled with old wooden cabinets, like a massive display room. However, the display shelves were shrouded in black fog, making it impossible to see what was inside. In the middle of the hall was only a table, on which was an antiquated brass typewriter, the kind that clacked when you typed. This typewriter only had 24 brass keys, each engraved with a character: public, righteous, sincere, real, friendly, kind, rich, strong. It was overwhelmingly positive. However, it seemed like the typewriter was stuffed with endless parchment. And without anyone hitting the brass keys, they would move on their own, typing 2 lines of small characters that appeared in the afternoon. Task: give the game to others. Task completed, reward basic skill learning chart, can learn others' abilities. He couldn't tell if this was his imagination or something else. It was said that some people could create memory palaces, and even recreate a fantasy universe based on their mental willpower within the memory palace, but Ren Xiaosu felt that his palace seemed a bit different from the description of a memory palace. But why would it ask him to give his game to others? Was this typewriter trying to make him a good person? In this world where even mentioning morality is a luxury, be a good person? No way. At that time, his consciousness stood in the center of the vast palace, looking around at the display cabinets. The cabinets seemed to float with items, but they were shrouded in darkness, and the dark fog prevented Ren Xiaosu from seeing clearly what the floating items were. These were the powers that he couldn't probe at the moment. To find out if the palace really existed, Ren Xiaosu needed to prove it with his actions. I might have gained some kind of ability, Ren Xiaosu stated, sitting at the entrance of the shanty and gazing at the starry sky after the rain. Yan Luyuan was taken aback. You mean, I'm not quite sure yet, I need to test it? Ren Xiaosu sat next to Yan Luyuan on the ground. The town is filled with rumors that some people can make a train drive from nothingness into reality. I didn't believe it until I met you. Now I might have a strange ability too, it's a peculiar feeling. Yan Liuyuan's ability was luck. It was a baffling ability. When Yan Luyuan wished for Ren Xiaosu to hunt successfully, even if Ren Xiaosu did nothing in the wilderness, sparrows would inexplicably fall in front of him. However, this ability had a backlash, usually manifested as Yan Luyuan having a high fever or other minor illnesses after making a wish. This was the initial reason Ren Xiaosu protected Yan Luyuan. He didn't believe it at first, but he couldn't deny it later on. Suddenly, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Yan Luyuan instinctively wanted to make a wish, but Ren Xiaosu stopped him. Don't make a wish recklessly, it could lead to trouble. Nowadays, Ren Xiaosu rarely relied on Yan Liuyuan's luck. He said it was because he could hunt on his own, and Yan Luyuan never contradicted him. The thin Yan Luyuan stared at the disappeared shooting star, lost in thought. Why do shooting stars fly so fast? What if everyone doesn't have time to make a wish? Ren Xiaosu thought for a moment and said, maybe it flies so fast because it doesn't want to hear your wishes. Yan Luyuan turned his head and stared at Ren Xiaosu. Yan Luyuan was Ren Xiaosu's night watchman, but it didn't mean he had to stay up all night. Ren Xiaosu would take turns with him. After all, Yan Luyuan had to go to school during the day. This situation was tormenting. Lack of sleep was a major issue. But living in such an environment, neither Ren Xiaosu nor Yan Luyuan had a choice. In the early morning, Ren Xiaosu took Yan Luyuan out. They carried all their valuable possessions, even his big iron pot. Unsurprisingly, when they returned to their shanty in the evening, it was always rummaged through. I heard that in the refuge stronghold, doors are never closed at night, and no one steals anything, Yan Luyuan said, carrying his bedding roll and watching Ren Xiaosu carry the big iron pot everywhere. This was practically all their belongings. On school days, Yan Luyuan had to carry his bedding with him, just like the other students. Everyone was used to it. Bullshit, Ren Xiaosu, although yearning for the life inside the refuge stronghold, firmly disbelieved that there are places in the world where doors are never closed at night. Some people think that even the farts of the people inside the stronghold smell sweet, and the air is sweet. But you can't always carry the pot around, Yan Luyuan said. What do you know, Ren Xiaosu explained, I found this pot with great difficulty. It can be used for cooking and catching sparrows. If we lose it, how can we survive? Ren Xiaosu carried the iron pot on his shoulder with one hand and held the giant sparrow with the other. As he walked down the street, many people cast envious glances at him. In the current order of species, humans are no longer at the top of the food chain. People have been saying that sparrows used to be smaller than a palm. Now, they can peck a person to death with one bite. Not everyone has the ability or patience to catch sparrows, and it's been years since anyone has seen meat. It would be a lie to say they weren't envious of Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu took Yan Luyuan to the city gate of the refuge stronghold. The towering walls were extremely oppressive. As they got closer to the stronghold, the buildings became cleaner, neater, and richer. The people living here all had some connection with the stronghold, either they were good at flattering or they still had relatives inside. But no matter what, the refugees, collectively referred to as contaminated, couldn't enter the stronghold. Ren Xiaosu walked into a house. The sign on the door read, grocery store. They sold cigarettes, matches, ironware, food, and clothing, but the prices were all very high. The old man in the house was particularly pleased to see Ren Xiaosu. This sparrow looks quite big. Ren Xiaosu threw the sparrow on the glass counter. How much? Hey, be gentle, this glass is valuable, Old Wang said worriedly. Then he casually threw the sparrow onto the iron scale next to him. 3 pounds and 6 taels, not bad, Xiaosu. At that moment, the abacus in Old Wang's hand started to click. His chicken claw-like withered hand moved like it was wound up, making the abacus ring. Today's market price is 200 per pound, so for you, it's 700. No, Ren Xiaosu insisted, winter is coming and sparrows are scarce, no less than 900. Old Wang was not pleased. He pushed the abacus in front of Ren Xiaosu. We're selling this to the nobles inside the stronghold. They are short of meat, but there's a limit to everything. We have to follow the rules. As soon as he finished speaking, Old Wang saw Ren Xiaosu turn around with the sparrow, ready to leave. He quickly grabbed the sleeve of Ren Xiaosu's worn-out coat. Where are you going? I'm going to ask about the prices at Old Li's grocery store, Ren Xiaosu said. Old Wang's grip tightened. Today, the manager in the stronghold had specifically ordered to collect game, and this news was not only known to him. Old Wang broke into a wide smile and said, how much do you want to sell it for? Ren Xiaosu still wanted to leave. I'll ask about the prices first. Old Wang smiled very kindly. Wouldn't that delay Liu Yuan's school time? Alright, 900 it is. What did you just say? Ren Xiaosu asked calmly. Wouldn't that delay, one sentence before that. How much do you want to sell it for? 1200, Old Wang. After a while, Old Wang counted the money with a heartache, licking his fingers and counting it over and over again, afraid that he might have miscounted. The final transaction price was 1198. Ren Xiaosu also made his concession. A sparrow sold for 1198, not because the price was inflated, nor solely because the sparrow was big, but mainly because ordinary game was not available in refuge number 113. What is rare is expensive. Old Wang wouldn't make a loss. This sparrow could be sold to someone powerful and influential for a small profit, and he could also curry some favor. Old Wang reluctantly stuffed a pile of small change into Ren Xiaosu's hand. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something and lowered his voice. Xiaosu, next time you catch a sparrow, don't kill it directly. Some nobles want it alive, the price is higher. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. Why do they want it alive? To kill it on the spot? No, old Wang shook his head, you wouldn't understand. Some people want to keep sparrows as pets. So you're keeping it as a pet? Not for food? Ren Xiaosu was puzzled, what a waste. This is good meat. The world of the rich is beyond your understanding, old Wang chuckled. It is said that hundreds of years ago, the wealthy used to play with hawks. But now, hawks are too large and too dangerous, so they have turned to sparrows. Look how fierce these sparrows look, the rich like this kind of thing. Ren Xiaosu thought for a while, realizing that at a time when most people were still struggling to get enough food, there were already people keeping sparrows as pets. However, it's more expensive for live ones, Ren Xiaosu said. These creatures can scratch someone to death if you're not careful. It's too dangerous. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu wondered, the refugees outside were contaminated, so were these sparrows not contaminated? Or was it that the refuge barriers only needed these refugees to work for them, and this wall naturally divided the classes? Fortune favors the bold, old Wang said with a smile. You can keep a sparrow all night, which shows that you are not ordinary. If you can catch a live one, maybe you won't have to do anything for half a year. Have you ever thought about saving some money to get married or something? Marry what? Ren Xiaosu said irritably. Old Wang pretended to be mysterious. Old Li's daughter from next door is in school with your brother Lu Yuan. She's a proper girl. By your logic, I should sell this sparrow directly to old Li, right? Do I need your introduction? Ren Xiaosu turned to ask Yen Luyuan, is old Li's daughter your classmate? Yes, Yen Luyuan nodded, she is quite sturdy. Go away, go play, old Wang said annoyedly, forget what I said, good intentions are wasted. Seeing that Ren Xiaosu and Yen Luyuan were about to start a comedy routine, old Wang decisively intervened. He changed the topic and said, remember, if you can catch a live one next time, be sure to come to me. Alright, Ren Xiaosu nodded. Actually, although catching a live one was dangerous, it was not impossible. He looked into the grocery store. How much for a cotton-padded jacket? The cotton-padded jackets are new, 500 each. You know the price, I got them for 490, I don't make money from the jackets, old Wang said, less people freeze to death, the better. You're quite kind-hearted, Ren Xiaosu said casually, get one, see what size Luyuan wears. Brother, you should also buy one, Yen Luyuan quickly said. Adults are talking, children should not interrupt, Ren Xiaosu frowned, I'm not cold. Money is a good thing. The consortia controlling the various refuge barriers issue currency to ensure the circulation of materials. It's convenient, but without money, it's difficult to move. The winter here is very cold, but the money has to be saved for emergencies. There is still more than a month before winter. If he can catch another sparrow, Ren Xiaosu thinks it's not too late to buy a cotton-padded jacket then. The key is, it's time for Yen Luyuan to pay his tuition, which is paid once a month. Ren Xiaosu took another look at the grocery store, his gaze suddenly stopping on the counter behind old Wang. How much for antibiotics? You want to buy medicine? It was only then that old Wang noticed the bandage on Ren Xiaosu's hand was stained with blood. You're injured. You have to buy some medicine, or else if it gets infected, it could be life-threatening. How much is it? Ren Xiaosu said impatiently, 210 each, old Wang said, antibiotics must be taken for 3 days in a row. I'll sell you 3 for 620, and give you an iodine wipe for free. I only have 10 left here. Ren Xiaosu thought for a moment and said, round off the change, if you mean to round off the 0 in 620, then shut up, old Wang said in annoyance. Reluctantly, Ren Xiaosu withdrew his gaze, forget it, I won't buy it. It usually doesn't get infected in winter. He turned and took Yen Luyuan to school. On the way, they passed a bakery, and Ren Xiaosu went in to buy a long black bread. This black bread was mixed with something unknown, and it scratched his throat painfully when he swallowed. Yen Luyuan chewed on the black bread and said, brother, why don't you pay the tuition and go to class too? You want to go to school so much. I have to go hunting, Ren Xiaosu said. I heard what old Wang just said, there are quite a few affluent female students in your school, right? You must not fall in love early. I heard that people used to get married at 13 or 14, Yen Luyuan retorted, although he hadn't thought about these things between men and women. But arguing with Ren Xiaosu was actually quite joyful. Finding joy in adversity is probably one of the strongest abilities of human beings. Ren Xiaosu pretended to slap Yen Luyuan on the back of his head. Can it be the same as before? You are still young, if you fall in love now, they will be someone else's wives in the future. When he said this, Ren Xiaosu smacked his lips. Someone else's wife, sounds kind of exciting. What are you talking about, brother? I don't understand. Yen Luyuan blinked and said. Go, stop pretending with me, Ren Xiaosu said irritably. The school is the cleanest and most orderly place in the entire town, and the only place with its own courtyard. Walking in from the outside, you can see the neat rows of onions, garlic sprouts, potatoes, cabbages. Originally, Ren Xiaosu thought that a place like a school should plant some bamboo or something, but after all, food is hard to find these days. And it's a blessing to have a place to grow vegetables. So Ren Xiaosu's previous wish was for Yan Luyuan to grow up and become a teacher, not because he respected teachers so much, but because he thought teachers were safe and could have their own yard to grow vegetables, and no one would steal them. What a wonderful thing that would be. Generally speaking, Ren Xiaosu's wishes are always simple. Yan Luyuan went in to attend class with his tuition, and Ren Xiaosu squatted on the wall outside, listening to the reading inside. He couldn't afford the tuition, so he could only eavesdrop like this. Sometimes the teacher would tell the students how glorious human civilization used to be. To be honest, the teacher himself hadn't seen that era, and what he was talking about now was just some hearsay. If it was passed on like this, it might be wrong, although it's not very reliable. Ren Xiaosu is fascinated by it. Sometimes Ren Xiaosu would take the knowledge and questions he didn't understand or hear clearly to Yan Luyuan, which made Yan Luyuan very troubled, because if he couldn't answer, it meant he hadn't listened carefully. So when Ren Xiaosu was eavesdropping, Yan Luyuan listened to the class very carefully. For some reason, Yan Luyuan admitted that his brother looked quite handsome when he was studying hard. No wonder little Jade was so infatuated with him. In the classroom, the teacher held a book and looked at some of the sleeping students with a melancholy expression. Then he looked out the window at Ren Xiaosu on the wall and said to Yan Luyuan, "Tell your brother that he can come into the yard to listen in the future." Okay. Yan Luyuan beamed. In the school, there was only one teacher named Zhang Jinglin, who taught all the classes himself. Others thought highly of the teacher, believing he knew everything. But Ren Xiaosu always had doubts. After all, one person's energy was limited, so it was impossible for Mr. Zhang to be omniscient, right? Ren Xiaosu was always different from others. He liked to reflect when he looked at problems. It was not until he heard Mr. Zhang's class that he knew this was called dialectical thinking. Yan Luyuan was sometimes puzzled because Ren Xiaosu often contradicted Mr. Zhang's views, but he still came to listen to Mr. Zhang's class whenever he had time. In the afternoon, Ren Xiaosu specially took Yan Luyuan to celebrate, not for anything else, but for him to listen to the class in the courtyard in the future. He used to squat on the wall and was too far from the classroom, so he couldn't hear clearly. Initially, Zhang Jinglin liked to close the doors and windows when he was lecturing, which was to prevent the noise outside from distracting the students, but after he found out that Ren Xiaosu was eavesdropping, he would leave a window open. Now, he simply called Ren Xiaosu into the courtyard. Many parents send their children to school not for them to learn, but for the convenience of their future marriage. Especially girls who have been to school can usually marry a good family. In this era, being literate and able to do 3-digit arithmetic was already very good. Everyone was busy surviving. If there was barely enough food to eat, who would care if you were educated? So most parents send their children to school without any long-term plan. There are poor and rich people in this small town, and where there are people, there will be comparisons. Yan Luyuan watched as Ren Xiaosu went to the grocery store to buy a cigarette with a filter. Old Wang even proudly said that his cigarettes definitely didn't have any additives and were very safe. 1 for 20, rarity makes it precious. Yan Luyuan asked doubtfully, "Brother, why are you buying cigarettes? You guys let me into the courtyard to listen to the class. I can't pay tuition, but I should show some gratitude." Ren Xiaosu said with a smile, "I know Mr. Zhang likes to smoke." In Ren Xiaosu's view, when someone expressed kindness, he should reciprocate. The two of them went to the backyard of the school during lunchtime. Mr. Zhang was eating fried cabbage. Ren Xiaosu proactively handed the cigarette to Mr. Zhang with a smile. Mr. Zhang didn't refuse, but told Yan Luyuan to stay away. "You are growing, and it's not good to smell the smoke." Ren Xiaosu "Thank you, sir, for letting me listen in the courtyard." Mr. Zhang used his matchstick for cooking to light the cigarette, then exhaled a puff of smoke contentedly. "There are not many students who love to listen to lectures like you now. If you want to listen, just listen. From now on, you just stand at the door, but don't enter the classroom." "Okay," Ren Xiaosu agreed. "Sir, I have a question. You say, Mr. Zhang probably enjoyed a rare cigarette, and he didn't mind whatever Ren Xiaosu asked now. Sir, you said that humans before the disaster had a lot of technology. We humans have not been extinct, so why don't we see those technologies reappear now?" Mr. Zhang looked at Ren Xiaosu. In the period after the disaster, humans themselves have not accurately calculated how many years everyone has been struggling. It was good enough to survive every day. Who was there to study? But we should have retained some information, right? If we study it, won't civilization reappear quickly? Ren Xiaosu was curious. "The generation has been cut off," Mr. Zhang said regretfully. "Let me ask you, if I give you a set of information on how to make airplanes now, can you make one?" "I haven't studied it. Although having information can save a lot of time, I still have to start from scratch," Ren Xiaosu said. "Yes, everyone is starting from scratch now." Zhang Jinglin looked at his cigarette that was only half left, feeling a bit distressed, as if hesitating to smoke or not. That he wanted to save half of it for later, but would it be a bit embarrassing to do so in front of Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan? Ren Xiaosu was still puzzled. So during those years, didn't anyone overcome the difficulties and continue to study? "No, they all starved to death," said Mr. Zhang. "Are all those knowledge lost?" Ren Xiaosu was not willing to give up Mr. Zhang looked at Ren Xiaosu seriously this time and said meaningfully, they are held in the hands of a few people. Alright, Mr. Zhang stood up and said, don't ask about this anymore. It's time for class. Ren Xiaosu asked Mr. Zhang one last question, when was the wall of our refuge barrier built, and why was it built? After the disaster, beasts were rampant. It was said that there was an insect tide a long time ago. Humans had no choice but to build high walls to block the danger, Mr. Zhang explained. But most of the beasts actually don't attack humans actively even after evolution, Ren Xiaosu was curious. Monkeys are still herbivores, sparrows still love grains, they don't eat people actively. Now the 113th refuge barrier is located in the circle of human survival range, and most of the more ferocious beasts are actually repelled outside the circle. The higher the serial number of the refuge barrier, the more dangerous it is. For example, the legendary number 178 refuge barrier suffers a lot of casualties every year due to the expulsion of beasts, and the 113th refuge barrier, in fact, is already considered inland. There are still many dangers, such as wolf packs, but they are not insurmountable. In that case, why is there a towering wall in such a large human settlement? Mr. Zhang laughed, as long as there are dangers in the wild, refugees can only live by relying on the refuge barriers. At this time, the refuge barriers will have a large amount of cheap labor. Do you think the financial groups behind the refuge barriers do not have the strength to completely wipe out the dangers in the wild? Human hot weapons are more powerful than you think, but why should they wipe them out? They are not threatened. Ren Xiaosu fell into thought when he heard this. Although he was precocious, he was destined not to understand some things because he had not experienced them. This was also the reason why he was eager for knowledge. Mr. Zhang continued, they won't tear down the wall. How could the vested interest class inside the wall give up this natural class barrier? As he said, Mr. Zhang went to change his clothes. Ren Xiaosu asked curiously, why are you changing your clothes, sir? The one you just wore wasn't dirty. Mr. Zhang adjusted his collar and said, the one just now smelled of smoke, and it's not good for the students to smell it. Yan Luyuan was full of respect, while Ren Xiaosu was a little unhappy. Then it's okay for me to smell it, sir? You didn't ask me to stay away just now. Mr. Zhang thought for a long time, get out. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu suddenly heard the voice from the palace in his mind again, task, it's never a bad thing to desire knowledge, but what you learn, you have to teach. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. He didn't understand what this task was asking him to do. During the afternoon class, the students all felt very fresh. There was a Ren Xiaosu who was several years older than them standing outside the door. So many students turned their heads to look at him that it took Mr. Zhang several knocks on the blackboard to stop the students' curiosity. He said, we will have a survival class this afternoon. This was the uniqueness of the school in this era. It not only taught literature and science, but also survival. However, this class had always been a headache for Mr. Zhang because he really wasn't good at wilderness survival. So most of the time he could only recite the preserved materials. Mr. Zhang looked at the students in the classroom, pay attention, don't think that danger is far away from you. Now you have your parents to protect you. When you grow up, you have to learn to protect yourself. Today we will talk about what to do if you encounter a wolf pack in the wild. The students in the classroom actually liked to listen to the survival class the most. Other courses were too boring for their age. The survival class was interesting to listen to. This time, the classroom was silent. Mr. Zhang looked at Ren Xiaosu who was standing at the door listening to the lecture. Come on, you tell me, what should you do if you encounter a wolf pack in the wild? Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and said, you should choose a slope with trees all around, because this way the feng shui of the burial site is better. Mr. Zhang. When Zhang Jinglin was speechless about Ren Xiaosu's answer, he didn't know that Ren Xiaosu was also confused. He just taught everyone what he knew, so why hadn't the task been completed yet? Did he teach the wrong knowledge? Sir, Ren Xiaosu said seriously, you probably haven't seen how big the wolves outside are now. Many people in the town haven't even seen them or dealt with them. But I have. No matter if you encounter a pack of wolves or a lone wolf, you'd better choose your grave right away. Ren Xiaosu originally thought that Zhang Jinglin would refute him, because saying so might affect the authority and dignity of the teacher. However, Zhang Jinglin thought for a long time and suddenly said, from now on, you can sit in the classroom and teach survival classes. For the first time, the town school outside the 113th refuge barrier had a substitute teacher. However, Ren Xiaosu did not explain in class how he survived after encountering a lone wolf or even a pack of wolves. Task completed, reward 1.0 strength. Until a day passed, Ren Xiaosu still had no chance to use the basic skill learning chart. Going to school was because he liked to absorb knowledge, but Zhang Jinglin's knowledge did not help him survive much for the time being. Ren Xiaosu's priority was still survival. So, the map couldn't be used, so he couldn't verify whether everything in his mind was from his imagination. However, Ren Xiaosu had been waiting because he felt there would be another task. Now that he has completed another task and gained 1.0 strength, this is a very intuitive number, and Ren Xiaosu's feeling of his body is even more intuitive because he could even feel that the muscles under his clothes had slightly bulged, which was a real supernatural phenomenon. No one could suddenly gain extra muscle strength in a short time of 0.1 seconds. Now Ren Xiaosu is really sure that the palace in his mind is indeed a unique ability. This makes Ren Xiaosu feel ecstatic. In fact, he should have been happy a long time ago, but he was afraid it was fake. A hunter must be very familiar with his body. You need to know how much weight you can carry, and you also need to know how fast and cruel you can punch or stab. So Ren Xiaosu immediately assessed his new strength. If a normal adult man is 3.0, then the previous Ren Xiaosu is 2.5. He was only 17 years old, and it was normal to be weaker than an adult. He survived in the town these years not because he was strong, but because he was ruthless enough and alert and calm enough. Now his strength has surpassed that of normal adults, which means that his chances of survival on this wasteland are greater. When he went home from school, Yan Luyuan excitedly said, "Brother, now you have become a substitute teacher, maybe you can take over as our town teacher in the future." Ren Xiaosu hesitated for a moment. It seems to be true. Mr. Zhang was also a substitute teacher at the beginning, and he took over the school after the old man died. That's right, everyone in our town knows that if someone becomes a substitute teacher, they might be the teacher in the school in the future. You think, Mr. Zhang let you go to school and become a substitute teacher, he must want to choose you to replace him in the future. Yan Luyuan laughed. If this matter is known to the people in the town, they will be a little more polite to us in the future. That's not necessary, Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and said, I guess he might just be short of cigarettes. Yan Luyuan looked at Ren Xiaosu. Brother, are you serious? Actually, it's not bad to be a school teacher, Ren Xiaosu said. When I become a school teacher, I will give the position to you, so you will become a school teacher. For Ren Xiaosu, he really hadn't thought about going to school to be a teacher in the future. It's not that he looks down on this profession. If he looks down on it, he won't give it to Yan Luyuan, but he felt that he was not suitable for this job at all. If there is no chance to enter the refuge barrier in the future, then the wilderness is where he belongs. Ren Xiaosu was walking and fantasizing about the future of giving the school teacher to Yan Luyuan, but he didn't notice that Yan Luyuan had slowly stopped. Yan Luyuan looked at Ren Xiaosu's back, feeling a little unspeakable. This young man with a bandaged hand always wants to leave the best things to himself. Ren Xiaosu turned his head and found that Yan Luyuan had fallen a long way, so he said impatiently, "What are you doing? Hurry up. Coming." The chimneys of the factories outside the barrier were spewing white smoke, and the sunset shone on the backs of the two, as if life had never been troubled. On the way home, Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan suddenly saw the group of people coming out of the refugee barrier. About 13 or 14 people, half of them were dressed in colorful and strange clothes, and the other half were dressed in the combat uniforms of the 113th Refugee Barrier Ruler's mercenaries. It seemed that this trip was accompanied by soldiers. No wonder they dared to run to the border mountain. These people are looking for guides. They don't actually need the guide to have any combat power, as long as they know the way. However, Ren Xiaosu did not think that the private mercenaries of the ruler of the 113th Refugee Barrier were necessarily very powerful. In fact, he rarely saw these mercenaries come out. Whether these people have fought or even seen blood is a big problem. At this time, Ren Xiaosu saw that several mercenaries were smoking, the kind with filter tips. This kind of cigarette with a filter tip is rare in the town, but the faint smell of smoke came, and Ren Xiaosu clearly smelled a strange smell in it. This reminded him of what old Wang said, that many cigarettes in the factory were added with addictive drugs, which could make people excited. Ren Xiaosu was puzzled. The mercenaries who needed to keep their minds clear also smoked this kind of thing. He has seen some people go crazy while smoking, and these mercenaries just smoke more advanced ones. A few people gathered in the town to watch, because these people had clean faces, which formed a sharp contrast with the people in the town. Brother, is there a lot of water in the refugee barrier? Can you wash your face every day? Yan Luyuan blinked his shiny eyes. Don't envy, the oil and other things on our face can protect our skin. Ren Xiaosu distractedly comforted. However, he suddenly saw a unique existence among these people. A woman, wearing a duckbill cap. The brim of the hat was very low and she couldn't determine her age. She was wearing relatively normal clothes, loose but fitting. Ren Xiaosu paid attention to her because seeing her was like encountering a beast in the wilderness. There was something wrong with this group of people, and Ren Xiaosu believed in his intuition. Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan stood still and watched from a distance, vaguely understanding that this group of people was asking old Wang, who collects sparrows in the grocery store, about something that I only heard old Wang's loud voice saying. If you want to go to the border mountain, you must find that kid Ren Xiaosu. You can't go without him. And there are packs of wolves on the wilderness outside. I suggest you better not go to the border mountain. A mercenary sneered. The wolves will run away when they hear the gunfire. Do we need to worry about the wolves? Ren Xiaosu was stunned. So the wolves are afraid of gunfire? This may be the nature of beasts. He has never seen a hot weapon, so he is not sure whether the other party is right or wrong, but he always doubts it. Another mercenary asked, who is Ren Xiaosu? We don't need him to have any good skills, just know the way. Oh, Ren Xiaosu is a well-known good hunter in our town. He knows most of the roads. It's not a problem to find him. It's just that this kid has a problem with his brain. Old Wang said with a smile, you guys. Go find him, it's definitely right. Hearing this, Ren Xiaosu took Yan Luyuan and turned around and left. Is Old Wang's son also in your class, that fat kid? Yan Luyuan took a breath. Brother, don't involve family members, Ren Xiaosu frowned. He originally wanted to avoid this matter, but he didn't expect Old Wang to recommend him to this inexplicable band. Night fell, and the townsfolk all retreated to their homes. Those with houses would tightly shut their doors, while those living in shacks would seal their curtain doors securely. On his way home that evening, Ren Xiaosu heard that a man who worked at the glue factory had been stabbed to death in the night. The rumor was that someone had found out about the man's habit of saving money and had harbored malicious intentions. The townsfolk liked to live in groups, friends, siblings, and lovers would live together, taking turns to stand guard during the night. It seemed safer that way. Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan had initially teamed up for this very reason. However, there were some who were betrayed by their own companions. The perpetrators were usually short-sighted. What they didn't realize was that once they betrayed their companions, no one would trust them again. Perpetrators who ended up alone usually didn't fare well. Ren Xiaosu sat in his shack, unwrapping the bandage around his wound. Seeing the condition of the wound, he furrowed his brows. There was redness and swelling around the wound, signs of inflammation. When he saw Yan Luyuan approaching, he quickly rewrapped the bandage. Bro, is your wound okay? Yan Luyuan asked. It's fine, Ren Xiaosu responded calmly. I don't believe you, let me see, Yan Luyuan said, attempting to unwrap the bandage that Ren Xiaosu had just rewrapped. I said it's fine, Ren Xiaosu pushed Yan Luyuan away. If there was a problem, I would have bought medicine. You better not be lying to me. Last time you tried to tough it out, Yan Luyuan said, looking aggrieved. Ren Xiaosu sighed, don't worry, I won't joke about my life. In the animal kingdom, predators usually don't attack their prey lightly because they understand one thing: getting injured could lead to death, even if it's a minor injury. If wild beasts could understand this, how could Ren Xiaosu not? Hey, bro, look, there are 2 potatoes and 3 pills hidden under the chair. Aren't these the anti-inflammatory pills you wanted to buy today? They look the same, Yan Luyuan exclaimed in surprise. Did you put them there? I didn't put them there, Ren Xiaosu shook his head after examining the 3 pills. They are indeed ordinary anti-inflammatory pills. It must have been Sister Xiaoyu who put them there then. I only told her about your injury, Yan Luyuan said cheerfully, handing 1 pill to Ren Xiaosu. Sister Xiaoyu is so nice to you. Why don't you just accept her? Ren Xiaosu almost spat out blood. You really flip-flop faster than flipping a book. When there's food, you praise her. When there's no food, you bully her. Hee, Yan Luyuan started munching on the potatoes. The 2 of them usually didn't eat dinner. Ren Xiaosu said that it's best to eat well in the morning, fill up at noon, and not eat at night as it's not good for the body. This was a saying that had been passed down from before the disaster. However, Ren Xiaosu knew very well that the reason they didn't eat dinner was simply because they were poor, bro. Ren Xiaosu turned his head and saw Yan Luyuan lowering his head, his voice a little low. He asked curiously, what's wrong? Do you remember last year when you encountered the wolf pack and came back, someone secretly gave us a few pills that saved your life? Yan Luyuan asked. I remember, I've been looking for that person, Ren Xiaosu said. Those pills might have been sent by Sister Xiaoyu, Yan Luyuan said. The place where the pills were placed was exactly the same as today. Ren Xiaosu fell into deep thought. Suddenly, Ren Xiaosu heard footsteps outside. A lot of people. It was rare for people to move around on the streets of the town at night, but Ren Xiaosu quickly guessed who they were and what their purpose was. The band had to cross the border mountain this time, as Ren Xiaosu had guessed. Those few mercenaries indeed had other tasks. For example, the ruler of the 113th refuge had found some information proving that the border mountain was actually a mountain range formed by violent crustal movements. There might still be some things left from before the disaster there. They had learned about Ren Xiaosu from the grocery store owner, Old Wang. Although they had doubts about the mentally ill comment, they asked some other people and it seemed that everyone thought Ren Xiaosu was the best choice as a guide. Some even wondered what was so special about this young man named Ren Xiaosu that he was a celebrity in the town. Out of curiosity, they kept asking and finally got an uncertain answer. Ren Xiaosu seemed to be the only person in the 113th town who had encountered a wolf pack and survived. Last year, when Ren Xiaosu returned to the town after hunting, he was already exhausted and his body was marked with bloodstains from wolf claws. The people in the town, no matter how cruel and ruthless, would not harm a dying young man. They just watched coldly, but when everyone thought Ren Xiaosu was doomed, he miraculously survived and is now living well. When the band staff asked how the young man survived, Old Wang laughed and said that it was all thanks to Yan Luyuan begging for food from house to house. It seemed that someone had also sent a few pills, but they didn't know who it was. However, everyone in the town knew that although Ren Xiaosu survived, he was left with a mental problem. By the way, Wang Fugue, one of the band members, said to old Wang who was accompanying them. What do you mean when you say he's mentally ill? Oh, it's nothing, I was just saying, old Wang said with a smile, his wrinkles all squeezed together. It's not serious. Look, we're here. Old Wang could only dare to walk on the street at night when he was with these important people from the shelter. At this moment, he deliberately raised his voice, seemingly wanting everyone in town to know that he, old Wang, had a very good relationship with these important people from the shelter. Xiaosu, come out quickly. We have distinguished guests, old Wang called out with a smile. Suddenly, the curtain door of the shack was flung open. Ren Xiaosu was seen shaking hands with old Wang, saying cheerfully, congratulations, the father and son are safe. 6 pounds and 6 ounces. Old Wang. The band? The mercenaries? The band staff pointed at Ren Xiaosu and looked at old Wang. Is this what you call no problem? Also, what's with the father and son are safe? Isn't it supposed to be the mother and son are safe? The band staff said unhappily. Wang Fugue, do you know what the consequences of lying to us are? Is this what you call no problem? As soon as he finished speaking, the band staff turned around and left. They had held some expectations for the legendary Ren Xiaosu, but now they had encountered a madman. No wonder everyone in the town said that Ren Xiaosu was mentally ill. Isn't this mental illness?